Greetings, nutrition students, and happy chapter number 17. So let's talk about something that may not sound super exciting, but it's super important. When it comes to nutrition, we need to talk about food safety and the best way to handle our foods. Some of us are very unaware of how we can be spreading food illnesses and food diseases. All right, so how food makes us sick. So foodborne illness, 48 million Americans contract food illnesses each year, right? This is when you eat something, you go to a restaurant or somewhere and you eat something bad, you come home and you're throwing up and you know it must have had something to do with the food, right? And again, the throwing up is actually a good thing because our body is trying to say, you know what, that microorganism is not cool, let me get rid of it. And so we're gonna throw it up in order to do that, right? So bacteria. Bacteria in general, actually, most of it is not bad. So most environmental bacteria is harmless. We have bacteria everywhere, literally everywhere on everything. Bacteria are present on most surfaces in our homes, right? Your cell phone actually has 10 times the amount of bacteria than your toilet seat, your cell phone. And that is because, again, we handle it. We put it down, we pick it up. Our hands are kind of the biggest vectors or carriers of bacteria, transferring it from place to place. And some bacteria is good for us, right? That's why there was a push for antibacterial soap. And then we kind of slacked off that because we realized we don't actually want to get rid of the good bacteria that is good for us, right? So lots of toxins in our food and in our different substances that we eat. So something we can control is what we call cross-contamination. So cross-contamination is when we take something from one food or area and we transfer it, cross it over to another area. So an example would be if I were to wipe down my countertop with a sponge or with a rag, right? And then I were to take my cutting board where I cut my meat and I chop things, and I were to use the same sponge to wipe down the cutting board, right? I can be transferring different bacterias and different, things we don't want from the cutting board to the counter, from the counter to the cutting board. And so we don't want to do that. Your cutting boards in general need to really be sanitized. I run mine through my dishwasher, right? Especially if we have the kind of cutting board that you cut and it leaves little grooves into the plastic or whatever, because then now we have this issue of kind of getting bacteria into those grooves. I like the glass cutting boards because glass has this substance that we typically can't cut into, and so we don't get those grooves on there. So being careful of, using the sponge that we use to wash dishes and clean the counters and all that, separate from what we use to, do things like deal with our cutting boards or areas that we prepare meat and food. Right, so how food gets contaminated, you can read through here, but basically there's a million ways, everything from pesticide to different contaminants that are in the different big industrial size companies that are taking tomatoes and taking different foods and they're canning them and they're processing them. If there's bacteria in any of those machines, right, it gets passed on to the consumer through that canning process or things like that. So make sure to read through here so that you're aware of how you might be able to prevent that contamination. And again, as we said, even using the same serving utensils for various different foods. That's why it's best to have one serving utensil for each of the foods, right? And we don't let our kids do things like touch food, like, you cut something up and you put it in a bowl and then your child goes and picks one up and they go, oh no, I want a different one. And they put it back and they pick up another one. We don't want our kids doing that, right? Because it's like, if you touch it, it's yours. That's kind of got to be the rule. All right, and again, you can read through here some of the ways that we can we get these foodborne illnesses like E. coli and how we can possibly prevent it. We want to make sure we're cooking foods to certain temperatures so that the illness that was in the food is basically, done away with. We've killed it with the heat. Right, so again, continuing our conversation about these different viruses and different things we're concerned about. So one good example of kind of a risk for getting a foodborne illness would be if we were to thaw our turkey at room temperature. So think about Thanksgiving. Because American culture might say that we're going to have turkey for Thanksgiving. A lot of our families will, last minute go get that frozen turkey, and then all of a sudden overnight you're like, okay, I just need to leave it on the counter and defrost it. And we really don't want to do that. We would prefer everything. My bacon, my meats, if I'm going to defrost them, I take them from the freezer and I put them into the refrigerator. It's going to take longer, so you need to do it the day before and make sure that you give it time in the refrigerator. So what's going to happen is it's going to gradually grow from a frozen temperature state to kind of the cold temperature in the refrigerator, which is what you want, because that's still keeping those bacteria away. However, when we place it on the counter, we're going to go kind of do a dramatic shift and go from frozen state to room temperature, maybe even warm. Here in our area, it's very warm. And so maybe even a warm state of food, which allows, again, those microorganisms to flourish. We don't want to do that. So if you buy chicken or if you buy something hot, let's say I go shopping at Costco for my big family of kids, and I buy lots of food. And I like to get the chickens, the roasted chickens they have at Costco, and make different things with that. But what I do is as soon as I get that chicken from Costco and I get home, it goes into the refrigerator, right? And people will say, well, what if it's still hot? Don't I want to let it cool down before I put it in the refrigerator? And the answer is no, you don't. You basically want that cold refrigeration is for all of your food is going to help keep, again, the microorganisms away. I put my fruit in the refrigerator. I put almost my bread goes in the refrigerator. Everything goes in the refrigerator in my house. So again, that cold temperature is a positive thing. So again, the thawed turkey on the counter or at room temperature is an example of how we can develop a foodborne illness, because those microorganisms get into that turkey and it's not a good thing for us. And even after Thanksgiving, so you've spent all day cooking Thanksgiving meal, everyone sits down for Thanksgiving and enjoys your wonderful family experience, and then it's like the cooks are tired. They were up all day and night or whatever cooking, and what happens is the turkey kind of just sits on the counter because, well, someone might want seconds in a little bit, and we don't want to do that. That's one of the biggest downfalls you can make, is to leave turkey or other foods out on the countertop. So you're going to want to, I know it's like you're tired, but as soon as you kind of cut it up and served it, everyone's taken what they want, put your turkey back into the fridge, get it into the refrigerator as soon as possible. And just another note, make sure that when we got that turkey and we are cleaning up after our Thanksgiving, you don't want to put all of that turkey fat and giblets and all of those byproducts of the turkey down your garbage disposal, because the kind of the busiest day of the year, or the most popular day of the year for plumbers, is the day after Thanksgiving. Because when we do that, it tends to clog up our garbage disposals, which costs you a nice little fee or a bill, which you don't want. All right, the spread of salmonella. So where does salmonella come from? Salmonella comes from our eggs and our chicken. That's where it comes from. This is why we typically do not want to eat raw eggs. I've seen a lot of different people put raw eggs into drinks or protein type drinks and stuff like that. And again, the reason we want to cook our eggs is because we want to kill the salmonella that could possibly be in those eggs. And the chicken, same situation. We want to make sure our chicken is thoroughly cooked. We're washing our hands consistently, refrigerating it, and we're cooking it to a certain temperature. Right, so how do we prevent those foodborne illnesses? Kind of some safety tips, if you will. So storing our food properly, washing our hands, our surfaces and our utensils thoroughly. Even, if you use a particular fork or something to poke your chicken or to move it, then you can't use that same fork for something else, right? You can't then mix the green beans with it or whatever. You can only use it for that food. Refrigerating promptly. So that's what we're saying. Make sure that you refrigerate it very, very quickly. Right, and here's your cooking kind of parameters or guidelines. So make sure you look at this to see how high should I be cooking my foods. This is why I say invest in, a cheap, get them at Walmart, a cheap little food thermometers that you kind of stick in food, and it will show you a dial and it will go up to a temperature. And for certain foods, whether it's beef or poultry or chicken, we have certain degrees that we want it to get to make sure any bacteria that was originally in the food is killed off. Right, and look here how we kind of get the contaminants into our food, whether it's from us as humans spreading that, what happens to our waterways, right? When we talk about fish and different items, and what are we putting into our cows and our different beef products that we eat, right? Benefits and risk of pesticides. So as we know, our farmers are growing crops and foods and things of that nature, and unfortunately, the biggest kind of killer of our crops is our pest. Bugs that come to the corn stalks or come to the wheat stalks and they eat them, but our crops also get disease, all of these things. And so therefore pesticides are applied to our crops to help prevent those pests. They help prevent spoiling the food, like because we maybe have to grow it for so long. And so the good thing is we're protecting our crops, which, for farmers, this is their way of life. This is how they make their living. So they can't lose a whole crop or their family will literally be in the poorhouse. And so it protects our crops. It increases how much of our crop is useful, doesn't die off, right? And then the risk, well, part of that risk is that some of that pesticide remains on our produce or our food. And another one being we're concerned about contaminating our water supply with that. So this is why I mentioned to you before, we scrub our fruits and vegetables and we get that pesticide off. So reducing the needs for pesticide, how can we do that? So integrated pest management is what we call this combination of both chemical and non-chemical ways. What we want to do is what we call organic farming, although I want you to understand what that means. So organic farming, organic produce can still cause some foodborne illness. So don't think, oh man, I bought organic, so everything is good. No, that's not necessarily the case. Organic farming is ecologically sound. Definitely, we are very concerned about the environment. We're concerned about the ozone layer. We're concerned about our waste, right? We keep burying our garbage in the earth. We're going to run out of earth space to bury garbage. These are things we need to be concerned about. And so we want to do something that is better for the environment, always. Organic farming decreases but does not eliminate pesticides in food. So people sometimes misunderstand or have a misbelief that when I buy something that says organic, it has no pesticides on it, and that's not true. So make sure, because remember, organic foods are more expensive. They are. There's only certain things I myself can afford from the organic produce section. And so you need to be aware that's not what it means. There's still some pesticide used in organic farming, but it's not probably to the extent that traditional farming would be. So again, here we see, what does that organic label mean? So when something says 100% organic, really, it means that it's organically produced raw or processed ingredients. When it just has the word organic, it means at least 95% of it is in that category. And then when it says made with organic ingredients, it means that 70% is from organically produced ingredients. That's what it means. So be aware, because it can be misleading. We see the word organic and we think this is healthier and better. In some cases it is, but be aware of which one of these three you're looking at. Antibiotics and hormones in our food. So we do these things, yeah. Antibiotics use in animals may contribute to this antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So we give our animals antibiotics and we give them hormones too. We do, because, why do you think those roasted chickens are so nice and plump and juicy and big? It's because we really, we inject our animals with things so that the grower or the producer of those animals gets the largest yield or the most product out of them. We don't want a skinny little chicken that just yields a tiny little chicken this size, right? We want them big and plump so people will buy them. And so, as I said, for hormones, we do introduce hormones into our cows, and we do use antibiotics on our animals to promote their growth, promote their increase in size, things of that nature. So be aware of that. How to handle. So when the other day, my daughter was dying for a bagel, and there was one bagel left, and she goes to get the bagel, and she's like, oh, it's got a little bit of mold on it. Well, Mom, I'm just going to cut it off. And I'm like, no, honey, we can't do that. So if we find mold on our bread or on our food, the whole thing needs to go. It really means that your food is at a state that's, again, beyond. And just people do this all the time. They think, oh, I'll just cut off these pieces that are moldy. No, I want you to throw the whole thing away. That's what's healthiest and best for you in handling our food. Okay. So let's see here. Recommendations to limit consumption of pesticide residue in fresh fruits and vegetables. So first of all, buy locally. Yeah, so go down to the farmer's market at Kaiser or Lodi on Thursday, has awesome farmers markets, and buy from our local farmers, which supports them financially, and it's actually better for you in terms of this produce did not come on trucks from 5 states over. And it's been in a vehicle or in a car or whatever it has. It's fresh produce. And so you want to do that, right? Discard the outer leaves of our heads of lettuce and cabbage. So those are going to be the ones with the most pesticide or chemicals on them. So get rid of the outer. And then washing or peeling our fruit to remove wax and surface residue is another one. Now, for some of them, understand if we, get rid of all of the peel, we're losing a lot of the fiber or the good stuff in it. But definitely, I've mentioned to you, actually maybe getting a spray and using a scrub brush and, scrubbing those foods is something we can really do. All right. Be careful with our pregnant moms and our young kids. You need to read this to talk about fish consumption, because with our fish, we are concerned about the waters they come from and what type of pesticides or residues are in those waters. Again, you can read through this, the factors that affect that microbial growth. So time, temperature, when our food is in hot environments, it helps that growth to speed up. That's why we want to keep things in the refrigerator. Food processing and packaging, pasteurization. So what is that? It's a sterilization process that we do to eliminate the bacterial growth, because we'll see things like pasteurized milk or pasteurized orange juice, and that's what's happened with it. Irradiation really means that we use some radiation to kill microorganisms in our food. The use by date. Most of us are familiar with this because, we look at food and go, okay, the use by date here is, July 30th, whatever it be. So what does that mean? The use by date means that this is the last day the product is likely to be at its peak or freshest state, best texture, best use of the product. So for instance, if the use by date says something like July 30th and you pick it up and it's July 31st, depends on what it is. Okay, so let's say milk. So I frequently shop at Costco, so I buy these 2 big gallons of milk, and my family goes through a lot of milk. But sometimes by the time we get to the second container of milk, it'll be past the use by date, but the container is unopened. So if I open it and I smell my milk, it smells great. There's no reason I can't continue to use it, right? So understand the use by date. Unfortunately, in some ways, we can think of it as not the grocery store, but the industry's way to also get us to throw away food that may not be bad yet, right? They're saying it's freshest at that date. If I use it the day after, does it mean that it's bad? No. It may just mean it doesn't maybe taste as good as it would have, or it could mean it tastes just fine. That's kind of what I do. Again, when I do my grocery shopping, though, and I'm grabbing for milk or I'm grabbing for produce, I typically go to the back. Right? I go to the back because this one says it's used by July 25th, and I go to the back and I find one that says used by July 30th. Well, I'm going to do the July 30th one, right? Because I want my food to last the longest. So understand use by date. It doesn't mean you have to throw it away, but start to be aware of its deterioration. Food additives. So what is a food additives? If we look at these things, these are the processed type foods, and those food additives we talked about before, that it's these substances that add this texture and flavor to things. And they're classified here in many different ways. But understand, our foods have a lot of preservatives, a lot of additives, things we put back into them because they please us. We like them. All right, go ahead and go through your clicker slides to make sure that, again, this is solidifying or getting that information into your brain here. But food safety is really crucial, especially if you are the cook or you are the guardian. You're feeding young ones. It's your responsibility to make sure that you are following kind of these safety guidelines in our food. And I will then see you for our next chapter. I think it's our last chapter in nutrition.